the American Psychological Association has provided guidelines for psychologists, not rules for working with men and boys, which we'll get into in a little bit. But the American Psychiatric Association also published something about toxic masculinity.
Well, less. The American Psychiatric Association, equal to the American Psychological Association, I think conflate or confuse culture-bound aspects of being a man.
Yeah.
Social mores, social conventions, expectations, intergender expectations, intergender negotiated settlements, spoken and unspoken, implicit and explicit social contracts, etc., all of which are of extreme interest and importance and have anthropological, ethnological, and sociological dimensions, but have nothing to do with mental health. So they confuse these with clinical issues. The report makes a series of methodological mistakes, and there are so many, so numerous, that I don't know where to start. One of the things they criticize as a sign of stereotypical masculinity, which is essentially toxic, is the self-assigned role of males as protectors. What's wrong with that? But to start with, it's absolutely a cultural, societal issue. So clearly has nothing to do with psychology. This is the American Psychological Association, not the American Cultural Association, or American Sociological, or Anthropological, or Ethnological Association. It's a bit also self-interested, because the report puts emphasis on not seeking psychotherapy.
Right. So they're saying, come to us, we need more clients.
We're being boycotted by this group of Neanderthals.
Yeah.
I mean, of course there is also a series of underlying value judgments.
Yes.
For example, the report says, it's very bad that men don't express emotions freely. Really? Why? Because there is a hidden assumption or a hidden value. It's good to express emotions freely. I know numerous societies where the free expression of emotion, free unbridled expression of emotions, would be a serious indicator of mental problems. But it's clearly a Western value.
An American value.
I would even say an American value, which is assumed to be universal and well substantiated. So this is also, imposing value judgments in the guise of science.
Implicitly imposing them and saying, if you don't meet these standards that we've set out,
something's wrong with you.
Oh, you're sick. Oh, bring these men and boys. They're sick. They don't
something's
realize
wrong.
it. Yeah.
You can't divorce the DSM. You can't divorce treatment modalities. It all reflects value systems. It all reflects value judgments. It all reflects a highly specific context. Everything we do and everything we say in psychology reflects where we come from and what we believe in. It's legitimate to write a report like this if you make it clear.
Yeah.
Listen, I'll go a bit further. I'll go even further.
Yeah.
What is America? America is a microcosm of the world. Which community are you talking about? I mean, which America are you talking? Blacks, Hispanics.
Yeah.
I mean, Hispanics have a totally different mental health landscape than WASPs in New England.
Yeah.
I mean, which America? Even one could even not generalize and say America. I don't like the distinction with left and right. It's ahistorical. But there is a distinction between liberal and conservative. This is the view of liberal white men, not women.
Which is the view of liberals? The American Psychological Association.
Represents the prejudices and views and values
of liberal white men.
Liberal white men.
Today, in 2019.
Liberal white men in the United States, probably East and West Coast, the coastal communities.
Yeah.
Nothing else.
You said that there were errors and miscalculations in this particular piece. Is there anything there that you would regard as malpractice?
I wouldn't say malpractice, but I would say extreme cultural insensitivity.
Okay.
Extreme.
So you think this is actually a tone-deaf publication?
Utterly. I mean, I think the first thing you owe yourself is training in cultural sensitivity.
Yeah.
Where they're coming from? What is their mental framework? What are their expectations of each other? What are the gender roles in their societies and cultures, etc., etc.? You need to be sensitized to the background of the client. This is a prescriptive attitude, which is patronizing, wrong, and indescribably biased.
Yeah.
Indescribably biased.
Do you think this represents part of an overall movement that would be an attack on men?
I think we are moving to a world, we're trying to force the world to move to a unigender situation. We're
Okay.
trying to make men much more effeminate and women much more masculine, so that ultimately they converge into a unigender. Now, this is extremely disorienting. And the reason it is disorienting is because while gender roles are truly mostly culturally and socially determined, they still reflect a biological foundation. And here we must be very careful. And I don't know if you want to transition to that.
Absolutely, but this is a minefield.
We must
You
be
go,
careful.
you go first.
You must be careful, yes. Following my footsteps, or what's left of them after I blow up in the first mine. Yeah. Let's start with biological basics. The way we characterize the sex of a person is called karyotype. Karyotype is the combination of chromosomes that you have. Overwhelmingly, the global population is divided to XX and XY, which are also known as male and female, mistakenly. But never mind, XX and XY. But the truth is that there are 6 karyotypes, not 2. All of them sex-related. So that's the first mistake. The first mistake is to believe that there are only males and females. The sexual spectrum or the sexual variety of human selection and human behavior and human intimate partner choices reflects this karyotypic diversity. Having said that, gender is much more fluid than sex. I have a theory which goes as follows. Whenever there is gender fluidity and sexual fluidity,
Okay.
that leads to what Emil Durkheim called anomy. That leads to utter disorientation, terror even, because people need to behave according to gender. We can discuss why.
Okay.
And it leads to panic reaction, actually.
Just before somebody attacks you, you're not. I heard what you said very well. You didn't say people must behave according to traditional gender roles, but that they have a gender role. That's what you mean. A gender role.
I just mentioned North Albania.
Yeah, we could make up a completely new one, but they
Yes.
must tribally as animals.
There
we
must be a culturally, socially sanctioned and delineated and consensual
Yeah.
difference between men and women. Now, this difference it doesn't have to mean that one is superior, one is inferior. So I just gave the example of the most hyper-traditionalist society in the world, North Albania, where women transition to men without any problem. It's not that, but society sanctions it.
Yeah.
Social acceptance, social belonging, knowing your place, not in the bad sense, not like your place is in the kitchen, but knowing your place in society.
Yes. Yes.
Allows for much better functioning. The better you function, the happier you are, because it empowers you. For example, right now, this period, we live in sexual fluidity. Men can become women, women can become men. I can point to many periods of history. I'm becoming Slavoj Žižek.
Twitch more.
Yeah, I mean,
What?
so
Like what?
I can point to many periods in human history, in many parts of the globe, where there was sexual fluidity. But at that time, there was gender stability. I can point to other periods in history, other parts of the globe, where there was sexual constancy, male, female, but gender fluidity. Northern Albania is an example. But as far as gender, you could transition. I mean, you could be a man now and a woman tomorrow and go back to being a man, gender-wise. So we have sexual constancy, but gender fluidity. That's also okay. In all these situations, people are happy. They are not happy only when you have both.
And they are not happy now.
And they're not happy now because you have both.
Yeah.
You have both sexual fluidity and gender fluidity.
Is there an element of this of it feeling as though it's being forced?
I think historically it started with gender fluidity.
Okay.
Simone de Beauvoir wrote the famous book, The Second Sex, which was the harbinger of gender fluidity, who actually said women should utterly give up the feminine role. They should never get married. They should never, ever have children. They should rebel against the gender role. They should be men. Effectively, she said, should be men. And it is a very unfortunate confluence or coincidence or accident that modern medicine also allowed for sexual fluidity at the same time. There is only a certain amount of uncertainty that people can tolerate without developing extreme pernicious anxiety. Listen, after all, they want to know I'm a man, I'm not a man, and even if they transition, why are you transitioning? Why are you transitioning from men to women? Because you want to settle on something.
Yes, because the lack of certainty is intolerable.
Yes.
That's what's intolerable.
So you transition from men to women. The problem on epidemiological level, on population level, is that the amount of uncertainty about sex and gender has become intolerable.
Yeah.
And people have reacted normally, because we react to uncertainty with anxiety.
Yes. Yeah.
It's a double reflection. There is no such thing as masculinity in isolation, pigs in space. Yeah. And there is no such thing as femininity in isolation. The two genders and the two sexes interdefine each other.
You said there was a move towards unigender, a lack of sexual polarity, everybody meeting in the middle, sort of androgyny. But I know you're not a conspiracy theorist, so you're not suggesting that this is a deliberate effort to make people this way. Or are you?
Actually, I abhor conspiracy theories. Absolutely abhor. But in this particular case, yes, I do think there's an agenda. I know that it runs contrary to all the American propaganda. Because American propaganda will tell you that America is based on diversity. You can see how they like diversity by the way they treat their blacks. Yeah? So it's based on diversity. I don't think so at all. I think America, and this is very evident in its mass culture and the way it exports its mass culture, hegemonic mass culture and so on. I think America is a big homogenizer, a big unifier. I think America is diversity averse. Always has been, by the way. So I think there has been at least an 80-year, maybe 100-year agenda to eliminate sex differences and especially gender differences. Now we can talk about why, but I do think it's an agenda. I speculate that this is what happened. Owing to the Second World War, there was an enormous shortage in manpower. 5 million women started to work in factories and so on and so forth. Then the war ended, and the women tried to go back. Tried to come back to traditional roles. But it didn't last long. And the reason it didn't last long, because it opened the eyes of industry. Suddenly they realized it. They could outsource internally.
So through this emergency situation of World War II, the men have gone off to fight. We need the women to help out in the factories. They roll up their sleeves and say yes.
Women were paid 37% of the wages of men.
During that period?
During that period. And did the same.
And then big industry says, ooh,
wow,
this was good.
That's a fucking bonanza.
And they actually did. They did good work for much less money. Yeah. We need them back. We don't want them to go home.
And even that money that we pay them, they will immediately consume. It was a revelation, an epiphany. So the introduction of women into the labor market required an ideology. How to justify it? Americans don't do anything without an ideology. How to justify it?
So, I see where this is going. So
we bring them into because they're equal. It's not okay that they don't have access to the labor market.
So instead of saying, listen, we are greedy and we want you as wage slaves.
That's not the American way.
Please come and serve us. They've said, no, this is for you.
Yes.
This is about your empowerment.
It's your emancipation. We're emancipating you. It's like the slaves. We're emancipating you. And of course you should be equal to men. You should have equal access to jobs, equal access to education, equal access to everything. You should be equal to men. It's like instead of going to Africa and importing 50 million slaves, they went inland and employed 50 million slaves called women.
So are you saying that even today, even in the last 20 years, there's still women are still cheap labour?
Yes, of course.
There's still you think there's a wage gap, a huge wage gap?
I don't think so. Online.
Okay, of course, there's definitely a wage
Women
gap.
Are still paid on average 72% of men.
For doing exactly the same amount of hours?
Identical. The threat is real. The uncertainty is real. The risk is real. Men are reacting the same way to cheap Mexican labor. Same. So this is how it started. But of course, there was an ideological hyperstructure imposed on it, because that's how Americans do it. This is the outcome of power asymmetries. So if you want to solve the problem, it's not by destroying gender differences, gender roles. It's by rectifying power asymmetries, equal pay, equal access to education. The problem between men and women is not patriarchy, it's power asymmetry. On the contrary, we should celebrate gender roles.
We target power.
We target the power asymmetry problem.
And exploitation and abuse. That's what we need to be talking
about. Yes, I mean, if women are not paid the same as men for identical jobs, they should be. That's a power asymmetry. I mean, the West went about it in the absolutely wrong way. The West said, listen, there is power asymmetry that involves gender. Let us destroy gender. Now think about it. There is a power asymmetry between men and women. Let's create unigender. That's what they're saying.
Okay, I can't protect you. We were saying that the unigender, it was originally about money.
In America, everything started.
It started with
absolutely
money. It was a movement to get people into the cheap labor force and more consumers.
They discovered the industry used academic institutions ab initio from the beginning
to propagandize.
To provide an ideological cover.
Okay.
We're emancipating, because Americans have to present the most vile acts in the most favorable light. Women's emancipation, the way it was done, was utterly counterproductive, destructive.
The way you've just described it, it's a total...
Unigender. The unigender concept is utterly destructive.
But that's a con. So they said, okay, we're emancipating you, but it's a total con. They just wanted them to provide cheap labor.
It started as a con. Everything starts as a con in America. Fake it until you make it. Academe always covers up for the interests of political elites, industrial elites, and so on. We are reaching a point that I called unigender convergence. We are really reaching a point where women and men are beginning to become indistinguishable, and have lost all capacity to interact as men and women. They can interact as people, as persons. Interpersonal interaction is still somehow preserved, so we can go to a pub, men and women, and we can talk to each other as persons. But we desexualize the other. We degender the other. To go with a beautiful woman to a pub and to talk to her as though she is devoid of sex, devoid of gender, and is only a person? What is a person? It's an abstract. It's the ultimate form of objectification. It's much more objectifying than to tell her you're a beautiful woman. I desire you. Much more objectifying is to tell her, you are a unigender person. It's fucking robotic.
Everything seems to be pointing towards destroying intimacy, destroying the
I think
possibility.
atomization is a strong interest of the elites. And now I want to, before I'm the utter conspiracy.
Alex Jones will be calling you for an interview next week.
Before,
after
God forbid. There's a limit even to my vanity. Convergence theory. Specific classes and so on act in concert to obtain identical goals, even without intercommunication.
Yes.
Right. Elites have interest in atomization for a variety of reasons, very powerful reasons. So the elites are terrified. They're in panic. They are retreating and withdrawing, even physically. You have gated communities. You have, So they know the masses are coming. What is the only tool left in the arsenal of the elites? No tool is left, except one. Break the masses. Break them, isolate them, separate them, atomize them. Atomize this mass. It's simple.
In the face of, and this will be the last question that I ask before the inevitable happens, and I'm sacrificed to Moloch.
Again?
Look at the excitement.
Again?
What would your advice be to people who are frustrated, who are caught up in this this gender toxicity debate, toxic masculinity, toxic femininity, whatever the exploitation, whatever it is, that is causing so much distress and anxiety? What would your advice be to them?
My advice would be not to confuse equality with identity. Equality is one thing, identity is another. There should be equality of wages, equality of access to education, equality of access to opportunities. Everything. No question. Women and men should be equal as far as the social sphere. as far as gender roles, they simply should forget all the tripe, all the hype, all the propaganda and utterly poisonous, venomous ideology that accompanied the industrialization of female cheap labor. There's a big difference. Equality is not identity.
And identity.
Is not identity. Equality is not identity. Society should never be allowed to interfere in interpersonal relationship.
Okay.
Not even through its socialization agents such as psychotherapists.
Okay.
That's the big problem, the politicization of psychotherapy and of psychology. Sigmund Freud said, narcissism of small differences. People hate each other, not because they are different, but because they're the same, which would explain the rising wave of hatred between men and women. The rising wave of hatred between men and women is because men and women are becoming the same. They're becoming unigender. The only way to stop this is to not be the same anymore, to celebrate differences. Everything is difference, not similarity. Similarity destroys, atrophies. Difference creates.
Okay. Well, let's see what the backlash is from this one.
I may survive this week, but I'm very pessimistic about the end of the year.
The fallout will be heavy. Ladies and gents, thank you very much for your time and for your attention, and I look forward to speaking to you again soon. Thank you, Sam.